My sister uninvited me to her wedding, but I showed up anyway, hand in hand with her runaway groom. The dress wasn't white. Not really. It was the color of old bone, of bleached-out ivory, a shade so aggressively pristine it seemed to suck all the other colors out of the room. My sister, Sarah, stood on the pedestal in the center of our parents' living room, a living statue carved from silk and superiority. She was 2 weeks from her wedding day, and the entire house had been converted into a shrine for the occasion. My mother fluttered around her, adjusting a nearly invisible fold in the train, while my father stood beaming by the fireplace, his checkbook probably still warm from the final payment. I was tucked into a corner armchair, trying to blend in with the floral upholstery, sketching in my notepad. It was the only way I could survive these pre-wedding rituals, by documenting them like a naturalist studying a strange and hostile species. "Chloe, for heaven's sake, put that thing away and pay attention," my mother chirped, not looking at me. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment." I capped my pen. "I've seen the dress 5 times, Mom. It hasn't changed. It's still a dress." Sarah's eyes, the same shade of blue as mine but somehow colder, flickered over to me. A tiny, perfect frown line appeared between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. "It's not a dress, Chloe. It's the dress, and you're getting charcoal dust all over Nana's armchair." I wasn't, but arguing was pointless. With Sarah, facts were optional. There was only her narrative, and in her narrative, I was the resident screw-up, the artsy black sheep, the perpetual smudge on her otherwise flawless family portrait. She was 26, a corporate lawyer with a condo and a fiancé who looked like he'd been grown in a lab for a cologne advertisement. I was 18, just graduated high school, with a portfolio of weird paintings, a part-time job at a coffee shop, and no idea what I was doing with my life. We weren't just sisters. We were different universes occupying the same family tree. Later that evening, the house was finally quiet. The dress was zipped into a garment bag the size of a small car, and our parents had gone out for dinner, leaving Sarah and me to a tense, silent ceasefire. I was in my room trying to finish a painting for my portfolio when she appeared in the doorway. She didn't knock. She never did. She just materialized, arms crossed, leaning against the frame like a queen surveying her least favorite province. "We need to talk about the wedding," she said. Her voice was flat, stripped of the sugary sweetness she used around everyone else. "What about it?" I asked, not turning from my canvas. "Did you decide on the final shade of beige for the napkins?" "This isn't a joke, Chloe." She stepped into the room, her expensive perfume instantly colonizing the smell of turpentine and oil paint. She picked up a small framed photo from my desk. It was of me and Alex, her fiancé, at a family barbecue last summer. We were laughing, caught in mid-sentence, his arm casually slung over my shoulder. It was a completely innocent picture, but the way she held it, you'd think it was evidence of a crime. "Alex likes you," she stated, her voice dangerously low. "He thinks you're interesting. He thinks your art is expressive." She said the words like they were diseases. I finally turned to face her. "And that's a problem because you're a liability," she snapped, putting the photo down with a sharp click. "You're unpredictable. You with your ripped jeans and your sad little art projects and your constant need to be different. I have spent years planning this day. Every detail is perfect. The flowers, the venue, the guest list. Everything is under control. Everything except you." A cold knot formed in my stomach. I knew this speech. I'd heard variations of it my whole life. "What do you want, Sarah? You want me to wear a pink dress and make small talk with our ancient relatives? Done. I'll even smile in the photos." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "You don't get it. Your presence alone is a risk. What if you say the wrong thing to Alex's boss? What if you spill something on the cake? What if you just stand there in the corner looking miserable and everyone asks me what's wrong with my weird little sister?" The words stung, sharp and familiar. "So what's the solution? You want to lock me in the coat closet for the reception?" Her eyes narrowed into icy slits. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. "The solution is you're not coming." I froze, the paintbrush slipping from my fingers and clattering onto the floor. "What? You can't be serious. Mom and Dad would never— They don't have to know until it's too late," she cut me off. "You're going to get a sudden stomach bug the morning of, a terrible migraine, something believable. You will text me your regrets. I will play the part of the concerned sister, and you will stay here. You will not be in my photos, you will not be at my reception, and you will not ruin my day." She leaned in, her face inches from mine. "Don't you dare come to the wedding." She walked out without another word, leaving the threat hanging in the air, heavy and suffocating. I just stood there, my heart pounding, the smell of her perfume making me sick. For a moment, I considered fighting it. I could tell our parents, 'cause a massive scene, force her to back down. But I knew how it would play out. It would be a huge, ugly fight that would end with me being painted as the jealous, dramatic troublemaker. As always. Defeated, I sank onto my bed, the injustice of it all burning in my throat. She was right. I would ruin her day because right now all I wanted to do was scream. The next day, Alex came by to pick up a suit he'd left at the house. I was the only one home. He found me on the back porch, staring blankly at the garden. He had this way of being quiet that wasn't awkward. He just sat in the chair next to me, not saying anything for a few minutes. "Tough day?" he finally asked, his voice gentle. I just shrugged, not trusting myself to speak. "Sarah can be a lot," he said, as if reading my mind. "She wants everything to be perfect. Sometimes she doesn't see how much pressure she puts on people, especially you." I looked up at him, surprised. He'd never acknowledged the tension between Sarah and me before. He was always the perfect, agreeable fiancé. His eyes were kind, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something in them that wasn't just bland adoration for my sister. It looked like exhaustion. "She told me not to come to the wedding," I blurted out, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Alex's smile vanished. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. "She what?" "She said I'm a liability, that I'll ruin it, so I'm supposed to fake being sick." He was silent for a long moment, just looking at me. I expected him to defend her, to make excuses, to tell me I must have misunderstood, but he didn't. He just shook his head slowly, a look of deep, profound sadness washing over his face. He reached out, hesitated, and then gently squeezed my shoulder. "Chloe," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I am so sorry." He didn't say anything else. He just went inside, grabbed his suit, and left. The morning of the wedding arrived, gray and drizzling. I stayed in my pajamas, true to the script, ignoring the frantic texts from my mom asking if I needed soup. I told myself it was for the best. It was her day. But the quiet of the empty house was deafening. I felt hollowed out, erased from my own family. Around 1 p.m., just an hour before the ceremony was due to start, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. Annoyed, thinking it was a telemarketer, I answered without looking. "Hello? Chloe? Thank God." It was Alex. His voice was ragged, breathless, like he'd been running. I could hear traffic and a car horn in the background. My heart lurched. "Alex, what's wrong? Aren't you supposed to be at the church?" "I can't do it," he said, his voice cracking with panic. "I can't marry her. I'm at a gas station off the highway. I left. Please, Chloe. I don't know who else to call. You have to come get me. Now." My brain short-circuited. For a solid 10 seconds, the only sound was the frantic thumping of my own heart and the crackle of static on the line. "Is this a joke?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Alex, this is a really sick, twisted joke." "I wish it was," he choked out. "God, Chloe, I wish it was. But I'm looking at the sign for cheapest gas in the state, and my bow tie is choking me and I can't breathe. I can't do it. I'm so sorry, just— Can you come? I'll explain everything. Route 7, the big Sunoco station about 20 miles out of town. Please." The line went dead. I stood frozen in the middle of my paint-splattered room, the phone still pressed to my ear. My first thought was a purely selfish, vindictive one. She deserves this. A tiny dark part of me felt a surge of triumph. Sarah, the architect of perfection, the curator of her own flawless life, was having her masterpiece bulldozed an hour before the grand unveiling. But the feeling evaporated as quickly as it came, replaced by a wave of cold, terrifying reality. Alex sounded broken. This wasn't a prank. This was a man dangling over a cliff edge, and for some insane reason, he'd called me. I moved without thinking, a puppet pulled by strings of adrenaline. Pajamas came off, replaced by the first things I grabbed from the floor, a pair of frayed black jeans and a worn-out band t-shirt. I didn't look in the mirror. I shoved my bare feet into a pair of beat-up combat boots, grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door, and sprinted out of the house. The drizzling rain had picked up, and the world outside was a blurry watercolor of gray and green. My car, a rusty old sedan that coughed more than it purred, started on the second try. As I peeled out of the driveway, my phone began to buzz in my pocket. A text from my mom. "Chloe, honey, the guests are arriving. The church looks breathtaking. Wish you were feeling better." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. She had no idea. The 20-mile drive felt like 1,000 years. My mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Alex had always been perfect, patient, handsome, successful. He laughed at my father's bad jokes. He complimented my mother's cooking. He tolerated Sarah's constant micromanagement with a serene smile. He was the Ken doll to her Barbie, a perfect accessory for her perfect life. But I remembered little things. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes during the engagement party. The time I found him in the den, staring into the fireplace with an expression of such profound loneliness it had made my chest ache. The way he'd looked at my paintings, not with the polite confusion of most of our family, but with a genuine, hungry interest. "You actually make things," he'd said once. "You create something from nothing. I just rearrange numbers on a spreadsheet." At the time, I dismissed it as small talk. Now it felt like a confession. I saw the giant peeling Sunoco sign and pulled into the station, my tires skidding on the wet asphalt. And there he was. He was standing by the air pump, a solitary figure in a crisp black tuxedo that was already starting to look damp and pathetic in the rain. His hair was a mess, his bow tie was crooked, and his shoulders were slumped in defeat. He looked less like a runaway groom and more like a lost child. I parked the car and killed the engine, the sudden silence deafening. He looked up, his eyes locking with mine through the rain-streaked windshield. Relief and terror warred on his face. He got into the passenger seat, bringing the smell of rain and expensive cologne and utter despair into my small car. He just sat there for a moment, dripping onto my cloth seats, staring at his hands. They were trembling. "Thank you," he finally mumbled, his voice thick. "Alex, what the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. "They're at the church right now. Sarah, my parents. They're going to be looking for you. They're going to call the police." "I know," he said, shaking his head. "I know, I couldn't walk down that aisle." I stood in the back room looking at myself in the mirror, and it wasn't me. It was him, the guy Sarah wanted, the guy who agrees with everything, who has the right job, who drives the right car. And I realized if I walked out there, that's all I would ever be. Her perfect accessory. He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. "You were the only one who never looked at me like that. You looked at me like I was a person. When she told me you weren't coming, that was the last straw. A wedding, a life, without a single person who sees the real you? I couldn't do it." My anger deflated, replaced by a hollow ache of understanding. I was the court jester, the family screw-up, but in my rebellion, I'd become the only one who was authentic, and he'd seen that. He'd clung to it. Just then, my phone erupted. It wasn't a buzz this time. It was a frantic, screaming ringtone. Sarah's face filled the screen. My blood ran cold. I let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text came through. "Where is he?" Followed instantly by another. "The wedding starts in 15 minutes. If you know where Alex is, you tell me right now, Chloe." Then my mom called. Then my dad. The phone vibrated against my leg like a trapped hornet, a beacon of the chaos we had created. "They know," I whispered, watching the screen light up again and again. "They know you're gone." Alex watched the phone, his face pale. The panic seemed to recede, replaced by a strange, cold resolve. He looked like a man who had already jumped off the cliff and was just waiting to hit the ground. He took a deep, shuddering breath and turned to me, his eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity. "You're right," he said, his voice eerily calm. "They know I'm gone, but they don't know why. I can't just disappear. I can't let them think I was kidnapped or got in an accident. I have to face her. I have to tell her myself." He unbuckled his seatbelt and reached for the door handle, then paused, turning back to me. A wild, desperate look was in his eyes. "I can't do it alone," he said. "She'll never listen to me. She'll twist everything. You're my proof. You're the reason. You have to be there." My heart stopped. "What are you talking about? Beware." He looked me dead in the eye, his expression a mixture of madness and clarity. "Take me to the wedding, Chloe. We're going to go together." The words hung in the cramped space of my car, more absurd than the tuxedo, more shocking than the rain. "Are you out of your mind?" I finally managed to say, my voice a strangled squeak. "Go to the wedding. Alex, you just left the wedding. The point of running away is to, stay away." "I'm not running away anymore," he said, and the shift in his demeanor was jarring. The panicked, lost boy at the air pump was gone. In his place was a man who had made a decision, and the finality of it was chilling. Running away is what I've been doing for the last 2 years. Every time I said yes when I meant no, every time I smiled and nodded when Sarah picked out another piece of our life without asking me, that was running away. This is the opposite. This is running towards something, toward the truth. "The truth is going to get you murdered," I exclaimed, gesturing wildly. "Sarah is going to literally, physically, tear you limb from limb on the altar. My dad is probably organizing a search party with torches and pitchforks as we speak." My phone buzzed again, a text from my dad this time. Just 3 words. "Call me now." I ignored it. "Let her," Alex said, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, as if he could see the church down the highway. "She can scream, she can throw things, she can tell everyone I'm a monster. She's entitled to that. But she won't be able to say I didn't face her. She won't be able to tell the story where I just vanished like a coward." He turned back to me, and his eyes were dark with an emotion I couldn't name. "And you have to be with me. She told you not to come. She tried to erase you from her perfect day. Your presence, it's the one thing she can't control. It's the one piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit her narrative. You walking in with me? It makes the whole story real. It proves I'm not just having some last-minute panic attack." He was right, and that's what scared me the most. Sarah had built her entire world on a foundation of carefully constructed appearances. My very existence was a crack in that foundation. Me showing up, having been uninvited, with her runaway groom in tow. It wasn't just a crack, it was a stick of dynamite. It was an act of war, and a part of me, the part that had been belittled and dismissed and pushed into corners my whole life, felt a dangerous thrill at the thought. The part of me that loved my sister, that didn't want to see her publicly humiliated, screamed in protest. The 2 halves of my brain were at war. "Alex, this is insane," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "Insanity is marrying someone you don't love because you're too scared to disappoint them," he countered softly. "Insanity is letting your future be decided in a Pottery Barn catalog. Driving to a church to tell the truth? That might be the sanest thing I've ever done." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The tuxedo was creased, a small water stain blooming on the lapel. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. He wasn't asking me. He was telling me. And in that moment, I realized my choice wasn't between taking him to the church or not. My choice was between leaving him here on the side of the road to face the hurricane alone, or getting in the car and driving straight into the eye of the storm with him. I put the keys in the ignition. The engine sputtered to life. The drive to the church was silent and surreal. The rain had intensified, drumming a frantic, warlike rhythm on the roof. We passed manicured suburban lawns, festooned with cheerful, oblivious garden gnomes. It felt like we were in a bubble, moving through a world that had no idea it was about to be upended. My phone had finally gone silent, a blessedly dead weight in my pocket. I imagined the scene at the church, the hushed whispers, my mother's frantic pacing, my father's forced smiles, and Sarah. I couldn't even begin to imagine Sarah. We pulled into the church parking lot. It was overflowing. Sleek, expensive cars were parked at odd angles on the grass. Through the deluge, I could see the massive oak doors of the chapel. A few people were huddled under an awning near the entrance, smoking and talking on their phones, their faces etched with concern. They hadn't seen us yet. I killed the engine. The sound of the rain was overwhelming. "Last chance to back out," I said, my voice barely audible. "We could just keep driving, go to another state, change our names, become goat farmers." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Tempting, but no. He took a deep breath, like a diver about to plunge into icy water. "Okay, here's how this happens. We walk in together. We don't stop. We don't talk to anyone. We walk straight down the aisle, right to the altar where she's waiting." My stomach turned to liquid lead. Down the aisle? Alex. The pews are filled with people. Our entire family. Your family. All of their friends and colleagues. "I know," he said, his voice grim. "They need to see it. They need to hear it. No secrets. No rumors. Just the truth, right out in the open." He looked over at me, his expression softening. "I know what I'm asking of you, and you don't have to. You can just drop me here. No one would blame you." I thought of Sarah's face, contorted with rage, hissing at me in my bedroom. "Don't you dare come to the wedding." I thought of all the years I'd spent trying to be smaller, quieter, less of a problem for her. I thought of the way Alex had looked at my paintings, the way he'd seen me. I was done being small. "No," I said, my voice firm. "You asked me to come get you. I'm not leaving you now." We got out of the car. The rain hit me instantly, cold and shocking, plastering my t-shirt to my skin and soaking my hair in seconds. We didn't run. We walked, side by side, across the glistening asphalt toward the heavy church doors. A few of the smokers under the awning turned, their eyes widening in recognition. I heard a gasp. A woman's hand flew to her mouth. But we didn't stop. We reached the doors. Alex put his hand on the ornate brass handle, paused, and looked at me one last time. "Ready?" I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. He pulled the door open. The world inside was a sea of flowers and candlelight and stunned, silent faces. Every single person in that church, hundreds of them, was turned around in their pews, staring at us. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and confusion. At the far end of the impossibly long aisle, bathed in the soft glow of the altar lights, was a figure in a bone-white dress. My sister. Her back was to us, but I saw her shoulders tense. The organ music, which had been playing a soft, hopeful melody, faltered and died with a discordant groan. The silence that followed was absolute, a crushing physical weight. And then, slowly, she turned around. Sarah's face was a mask of perfect crystalline beauty. Not a single tear had smudged her expertly applied makeup. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, sparkling with tiny, diamond-like pins. For a fraction of a second, she looked exactly like the bride on top of a wedding cake. Flawless, inanimate, serene. Then her eyes found Alex. The mask didn't just crack, it vaporized. Her expression curdled into a look of such pure, venomous rage that it felt like a physical blow, even from 50 yards away. Then, her gaze shifted to me, standing next to him, in my wet band t-shirt and combat boots, my hair dripping onto the pristine white aisle runner, and the rage was eclipsed by something else, something deeper and colder, utter disbelief, followed by a betrayal so profound it seemed to suck the very air out of the chapel. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me, 1,000 unspoken questions. I saw my mother in the front pew, her hand covering her mouth, her face ashen. My father stood beside her, his expression a mixture of confusion and fury, his knuckles white where he gripped the back of the pew in front of him. I saw Alex's parents, their faces crumpled in shame and bewilderment. Every person in that church was a landmine of judgment we had to walk past. "Stay close," Alex murmured, his voice low and for my ears only. He took my hand. His was cold and clammy, but his grip was firm, an anchor in the swirling vortex of shock and condemnation. And we started to walk. It was the longest walk of my life. Every step on the white runner felt like a drumbeat, echoing in the cavernous silence. Left foot, right foot. The rustle of Alex's damp tuxedo trousers, the squeak of my wet boots. I kept my eyes fixed on the altar, on the towering stained glass window behind it, depicting some serene biblical scene that felt like a mockery. I could hear the whispers starting, a low, sibilant hiss that rippled through the pews like a grass fire. Is that his sister? No, that's her sister, the weird one. What is she wearing? Oh my God, look at his face. We passed my Aunt Carol, whose jaw was literally hanging open. We passed my dad's business partner, who looked at me with open disgust. I forced myself not to look at my parents, not to see the hurricane of emotions I knew would be in their eyes. I just held on to Alex's hand and kept walking, one agonizing step at a time. The walk down the aisle is supposed to be a journey toward a new beginning, a hopeful procession. This was a death march. We were walking toward an execution, and we were both the condemned and the executioners. As we got closer, I could see the details of Sarah's face, the tiny muscle twitching in her jaw, the way her perfectly manicured hands were clenched into fists at her sides, crumpling the delicate silk of her dress. She hadn't moved. She just stood there, a statue of fury watching our approach. The two groomsmen and her maid of honor, her best friend Jessica, stood frozen behind her, their expressions horrified. We finally reached the end of the aisle. We stopped a few feet from the steps leading up to the altar, standing directly in front of her. The silence in the church was now so complete, so heavy, I felt like I was at the bottom of the ocean. For a moment, nobody spoke. We were a tableau of disaster, the runaway groom, the jilted bride, and the sister who wasn't supposed to be there. Sarah's eyes were locked on Alex, completely ignoring me. "You are 2 hours late," she said, her voice dangerously calm, a low, vibrating hum that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "Our guests have been waiting. My parents have been worried sick. You have a spectacular explanation for this, I assume? One that involves a multi-car pileup and temporary amnesia?" Alex let go of my hand. He took a single step forward, creating a small space between us. He looked at her, and his face was filled not with anger, but with a deep, weary sadness. "No, Sarah," he said, his voice clear and steady, carrying through the silent church. "No explanation like that, just the truth." He took a deep breath. "I can't do this. I can't marry you." A collective gasp swept through the pews. It was a physical sound, a wave of shock and scandal. My mother let out a small, strangled sob. Sarah's lips peeled back from her teeth in a smile that was all predator. "You can't marry me?" she repeated, her voice dripping with saccharine disbelief. "Did you hit your head? We have a string quartet. We have a 5-course meal waiting for 300 people. We have non-refundable deposits the size of a small country's GDP. What you mean is you got cold feet and you need me to talk you down from the ledge like I always do. So consider yourself talked down. Now get up here, take your place, and let's get this over with. She was trying to control it, to wrestle the narrative back into a shape she recognized, one where she was still in charge. But Alex just shook his head slowly. It's not cold feet, Sarah. It's clarity. This isn't right. We're not right. I've been pretending for a long time, for you, for our families, but the pretending stops today. I'm sorry. I am so sorry for the way this is happening, but I am not sorry that it is. That was when she finally broke. The calm facade shattered into a million pieces, her eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to make the air around her shimmer, finally swiveled to me. She pointed a trembling finger, her whole body shaking with rage. You, she hissed, the word of viper's strike. This is you. This is your fault. He was fine until you started poisoning him with your weirdness, your negativity. I told you to stay away. I told you not to come. Her voice rose to a shriek. What did you do to him? What did you say to him? Before I could answer, before I could even process the accusation, Alex stepped between us, shielding me slightly. She didn't do anything, Sarah. She's the only one who didn't. She never tried to change me or fix me or mold me into something I'm not. She just saw me. And that's more than you've ever done. The words hit her like a physical slap. She recoiled, her face contorting in a mask of wounded pride and disbelief. And then, something in her seemed to snap. The last thread of her composure, of her carefully constructed public image, just broke. She looked from Alex's resolute face to my soaked t-shirt, and a new, horrifying kind of understanding dawned in her eyes. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, aimed not at Alex, but directly at me. I see, she whispered, her voice suddenly devoid of all emotion, flat and dead. She took a step forward, her movements eerily calm. She smoothed the front of her perfect dress, then looked up at the shocked faces of her guests, her family, our family. She drew herself up to her full height, a queen addressing her court. There seems to have been a change of plans, she announced, her voice ringing with a chilling, theatrical clarity. She turned her gaze back to us, a slow, deliberate smile spreading across her face, a smile that didn't touch her eyes. It was the scariest smile I had ever seen. It seems my fiancé has found someone else, someone he feels truly sees him. Her eyes bored into me. So why should we let this beautiful church, all these wonderful flowers, and this very expensive champagne go to waste? She paused, letting the silence stretch, savoring the moment. The wedding is still on, but I think we'll be needing a new bride. The silence that followed her pronouncement was different. It wasn't the silence of shock anymore. It was the silence of a bomb having been detonated, a ringing in the ears as everyone tried to comprehend the sheer, magnificent insanity of what she had just said. A new bride? The words were so audacious, so completely unhinged, that my brain couldn't form a coherent thought. I just stared at her, at the terrifying, triumphant smile plastered on her face. She was taking the ultimate humiliation and twisting it into a weapon aimed directly at me. Alex looked as stunned as I felt. "Sarah, stop it," he said, his voice a low warning. "Don't do this." "Do what, Alex?" she purred, taking another graceful step towards us. She was playing to the crowd now, her voice resonating with theatrical sorrow. "Don't salvage something from the wreckage you've created? You've made your choice. You chose her." She gestured towards me with a flick of her wrist, as if I were a particularly unappealing item up for auction. The little sister who was so jealous she couldn't bear to see me happy, the one who seduced my fiancé just weeks before our wedding. It's a tragic story, isn't it? but perhaps it can have a happy ending after all. She was rewriting the narrative in real time, painting herself as the magnanimous, wronged woman and me as the conniving, home-wrecking villain. I could feel the eyes of the congregation shifting, their confusion hardening into suspicion, their gazes on me now filled with accusation. My mother was openly weeping in the front row, and my father looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. Sarah's eyes locked onto mine, glittering with malicious glee. "Well, Chloe, cat got your tongue? He's all yours. The altar is waiting. I'm sure we can find a dress that fits, though perhaps what you're wearing is more appropriate for the occasion." That was it. That was the spark. The condescension, the public shaming, the lifetime of being made to feel small and wrong and inadequate, it all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard anger inside me. Alex started to speak, to defend me, but I put a hand on his arm, stopping him. This wasn't his fight anymore. This was between me and my sister. This was about more than a ruined wedding. This had been brewing for 18 years. I took a step forward, meeting her gaze without flinching. My voice, when it came out, was quiet, but it carried in the dead, silent church. "No, Sarah." She arched a perfect eyebrow. "No?" "No," I repeated, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. "There will be no wedding today. Not for you, and certainly not for me, because you've missed the entire point." I glanced at Alex, then back at her. "This isn't about me wanting him. This was never about me. This is about him not wanting you." The smile on her face faltered for the first time. "You're right about one thing," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "He did choose me. He chose to call me when his whole world was falling apart. And do you know why? Because for years, you have treated him exactly the way you've treated me. Like an accessory, like a project, like something to be managed and perfected until he fit neatly into the little box you built for him. You didn't want a husband, Sarah. You wanted a prop for your perfect life. And your perfect life didn't have room for a messy, unpredictable little sister who reminded you that not everything could be controlled." I took another step, closing the distance between us until we were only a few feet apart. I didn't seduce him. I didn't have to. I just listened. I saw a man who was suffocating, and I didn't tell him to just breathe quieter. You were so busy planning your wedding, you never once stopped to get to know the groom. Every word was a stone, and I could see them landing, cracking the icy facade she had so carefully constructed. Her face began to crumble, the rage and bravado giving way to a raw, gaping wound of humiliation. The guests were forgotten. The world had shrunk to the space between us. "You didn't uninvite me from your wedding because you were afraid I'd spill something, Sarah," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "You uninvited me because I'm the only one who isn't afraid of you, because you knew I could see the cracks, and you were terrified that he could see them too." Tears finally welled in her eyes, hot and angry. They traced paths through her perfect foundation. The queen had been dethroned. The statue was broken. She just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no sounds came out. The spell was broken. The whispers in the pews changed their tune, shifting from condemnation of me to a horrified pity for her. She had overplayed her hand, and in her attempt to destroy me, she had only exposed herself. Without another word, I turned around. I took Alex's hand again. "Let's go," I said softly, and we walked. Not back down the aisle, past the gawking faces. We walked to the side, past the altar, and through a small wooden door that led to the church's back garden. As the heavy door clicked shut behind us, cutting off the suffocating silence of the chapel, it was like coming up for air. The rain had softened to a gentle mist, washing the world clean. We stood there for a long moment, surrounded by damp roses and the quiet drip of water from the eaves, just breathing. We didn't talk about what came next. We didn't know. His life was in ruins, my family was in turmoil, and we were standing in the wreckage of it all. But for the first time, there were no scripts, No expectations. There was just the quiet truth of the moment. He looked at me, his eyes full of a gratitude so immense it needed no words. He had run away from his wedding, but he had found something else. He'd found a witness. And I, the girl who was told she didn't belong, had finally found my voice. We had arrived at the wedding, just as my sister had forbidden, and it had shocked everyone. But the biggest shock was the quiet, terrifying, and liberating freedom on the other side of the disaster we had created. The future was a blank canvas, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to make a mess.